I remember perfectly the first time I walked into a Chipotle. It was more than a decade ago, and it felt like the future of fast food. It wasn't the greasy counter of a burger joint, nor the sad salad bar of a supermarket. It was a shiny stainless steel assembly line, full of ingredients that looked real, fresh cilantro, hand-mashed avocados, meats that didn't look processed. Paying $10 for a burrito the size of a newborn didn't just feel fair, it felt smart. It was an investment in my lunch. It was food with integrity, or so we were told. Fast forward to today, and that feeling has evaporated. Walking into a Chipotle now feels like negotiating a peace treaty, and it seems I'm not the only one who feels that way. The company just issued a warning that sent Wall Street into a panic, and its stock plummeted in one of its worst days ever. The crash wasn't just a minor correction. We're talking about a drop of nearly 50% from its peak. But the real bombshell wasn't in the stock charts. It was in the words of their own CEO. On a call with investors, with almost brutal honesty, he said this, and I quote, "We have seen a considerable reduction among consumers earning less than $100,000 a year." And to add fuel to the fire, he added that the 25 to 34 age group, in which they are overexposed, has measurably pulled back. In corporate language, a measurable pullback is the equivalent of saying your most loyal customers are fleeing en masse. This isn't just a rough financial patch for a fast food chain, it's the canary in the coal mine for the consumer economy. It's a story about arrogance, about disconnection, and about how a brand that had it all consciously decided to betray the promise that made it famous. And to understand how we ended up with this sad, expensive burrito, we have to unravel this story in 5 acts. 5 clues that reveal how Chipotle committed the perfect crime against itself. Because what's happening here goes much deeper than just a simple price increase. It's a masterclass in what not to do when the world is screaming at you to change course. To begin, we have to understand the genesis of its success. Chipotle never competed on price. Its battleground was quality and, more importantly, the perception of status. In the 2000s, eating at Chipotle was a statement. It meant you were conscious about food, that you valued freshness and natural ingredients, and that you could afford it. It was the iPhone of burritos, clean design, a superior user experience, and a premium price that made you feel like part of an exclusive club. They built a powerful brand around the idea of food with integrity. This slogan was pure marketing genius. They weren't just selling food, they were selling a philosophy. They made you feel that by choosing Chipotle, you were making an ethical, almost virtuous decision. And for years, it worked perfectly. The problem is that when you build your castle on the hill of superiority, you have to make sure the view is always worth the climb. The old Chipotle offered tangible value that justified its price. The burritos were monstrous, stuffed to the point of bursting. You could ask for a little more rice or beans without getting a death stare. There was an implicit generosity in the transaction. You paid more, but you got much more in return. Today, that castle is crumbling. The price has kept climbing sky high, but the perception of value has plummeted. A basic burrito can easily cost $14 or $15, and if you add guacamole and a drink, you're flirting with $20. Chipotle went from being an affordable luxury to a questionable financial decision. It became like that friend who suddenly gets rich and snobby and no longer wants to go to the same bars as you, even though he's still wearing the same old t-shirt. The integrity of their food might still be there, but the integrity of their value proposition has completely disappeared. And this leads us directly to the second act of this culinary tragedy, the Great Contraction. If there's one thing a consumer hates more than a price hike, it's feeling like they're being taken for a fool. And that's exactly what happened with shrinkflation, that infamous practice of giving you less product for the same or even more money. For months, social media was flooded with videos and photos from disappointed customers. Burritos that looked skinny and sad, half-empty bowls, employees using serving spoons as if they were measuring plutonium for a nuclear bomb. People aren't stupid. They realized that the portions were shrinking. It was a constant complaint, a murmur that turned into a deafening outcry on the internet. At first, the company denied it or ignored it, as big corporations often do. But the pressure was so great that they finally had to admit it. In an incredibly awkward interview, the former CEO admitted that yes, they had been trying to control ingredient costs, which resulted in smaller portions. The excuse was that they wanted to maintain consistency, but for the customer, the only consistency was disappointment. This was a catastrophic mistake. The giant, overstuffed burrito wasn't just a product, it was their symbol, their flag. It was the image we all had in our minds. Reducing its size was like Ferrari starting to make cars with lawnmower engines. Ordering a burrito at Chipotle became a lottery. Would you get the generous employee who ignored the rules or the one who measured the rice with an electron microscope? It's like playing Russian roulette with your lunch. The psychological impact of this is devastating. Not only are you paying more, but you leave hungry. The feeling of being ripped off is one of the most powerful and negative emotions a brand can generate. and Chipotle was serving it up on a silver platter with an extra side of pico de gallo. So now we have higher prices and smaller portions. Logic would dictate that the next step would be to try to win the customer back with some kind of offer, a promotion, some show of good faith. But no, Chipotle decided to do the exact opposite, which brings us to the third and perhaps most revealing act, the denial of value. In the history of fast food, there is an unwritten rule. When the economy wobbles, people look for value. McDonald's didn't survive and thrive for decades just on hamburgers. It did so with the dollar menu, with 2-for-1 deals, with the Happy Meal. Value is the anchor that keeps customers afloat in times of uncertainty. Chipotle, in an act of almost poetic corporate arrogance, decided that this rule didn't apply to them. Their CEO said it outright on that same investor call that tanked their stock. Value as a price point is not and will not be a strategy for Chipotle. Read that again. It's not a strategy. They're loudly proclaiming that they refuse to compete on the very battlefield where most of their customers are fighting every day, their budget. Their attempts to offer value have been downright insulting. I remember seeing a Halloween promotion that said if you showed up in costume between 3 and 6 in the afternoon, you'd get your burrito at half price. It's nonsense that most people won't even bother with. Or their brilliant idea of catering for small groups, where you can get food for 4 people for the modest sum of $60. That's $15 per person, without drinks. That's not an offer, it's just repackaging a product that already existed. Saying you're not going to compete on price is like a low-cost airline saying, you know what? From now on, we only offer first-class seats with caviar, but you'll still have to pay for your carry-on luggage. It's a complete disconnect from the reality of their audience. They're betting everything on their brand being so strong, so aspirational, that people will keep paying whatever it takes. And the numbers, their own numbers, show that they're losing that bet. This refusal to offer value inevitably leads us to the fourth act, the forgotten customer. Who built Chipotle? It wasn't millionaires on their private jets. It was college students looking for a decent meal after class. It was young professionals who wanted something quick, but not junk food. It was millennials and Gen Z, a group that, while they value quality, are also incredibly price sensitive. The company itself admits that 40% of its customers earn less than $100,000 a year, and that its key demographic, those aged 25 to 34, is the one that's leaving the most. And why is that? Because it's the group that's suffering the most. We're talking about the generation facing student loan repayments, sky-high rents, and wage growth that isn't keeping up with inflation. For them, an $18 lunch isn't a splurge, it's a significant part of their daily budget. Chipotle is treating its core customers like a toxic ex. They raise prices on everything, give them less attention, and then act surprised when they stop calling. It's a textbook case of a company forgetting its buyer persona, its ideal customer. They've pivoted to attract a higher income customer, ignoring the fact that the base of their pyramid, the one holding up the whole structure, is crumbling. In marketing terms, their customer acquisition cost must be through the roof because they have to spend a fortune attracting new customers to replace the legion of loyal ones who are jumping ship. They forgot the first rule of business. It's much cheaper to keep an existing customer than to get a new one. And now they're paying the price for that amnesia. Finally, this drama isn't happening in a vacuum. The fifth and final act is the grand backdrop, the mirage of the K-shaped economy. After the pandemic, the economic recovery has not been uniform. It has taken the shape of the letter K, with one line going up and the other going down. At the top, you have the big tech companies, luxury brands, and high-income segments whose fortunes and stocks have soared. At the bottom, you have the middle and working class, small businesses, and everyone whose wages can't keep up with inflation. Companies like Amazon or Google are reporting record profits, while those that depend on the average consumer, like Chipotle, are starting to show cracks. Chipotle made the fatal mistake of believing that its customers were on the upward arm of the K. They saw overall inflation as an excuse to inflate their own margins, assuming their clientele could absorb the hits without any problem, but they were completely wrong. Their main customers are, for the most part, on the downward arm of the K. They're cutting back on expenses, looking for cheaper alternatives, and reconsidering what counts as an affordable luxury. Meanwhile, other fast food chains, even some considered premium like Shake Shack, or more traditional ones like Burger King or Domino's, are seeing excellent results. Why? Because they've understood the moment. They've launched promotions, strengthened their value menus, and sent a clear message. We understand times are tough, and we're here for you. Chipotle, on the other hand, sent the opposite message. If you can't afford our guacamole, that's your problem, not ours. Chipotle thought it was riding the luxury elevator going up in the K-shaped economy, but didn't realize the cable was made of corn tortillas and its customers' patience. And so we come to the end of this burrito autopsy. What we see is a self-inflicted wound, a perfect storm of poor strategic decisions. They started with the illusion of being premium, which faded away. They made it worse with the betrayal of shrinkflation. They locked themselves in a suicidal denial of value. They turned their backs on the customers who made them great. And to top it all off, they completely misread the map of today's economy. They're not victims of a bad economy, they're the architects of their own decline. They've tested their customers' loyalty to the breaking point, and now they're seeing the consequences. The question that remains is whether they can turn back. Can a brand so proud admit its mistake and reconnect with real people? Or will they stay in their ivory tower, watching their empire crumble grain by grain of rice? Do you think Chipotle can recover, or have you already found your new burrito spot? I'd love to know what was the last straw for you. If this story about how a beloved brand can lose its way and completely disconnect from its customers resonates with you, it turns out Chipotle isn't the only one. Now almost everyone hates Starbucks. In the video now appearing on screen, I explain. It's basically the same story, but with expensive coffee instead of burritos. Thanks for joining me.